Good afternoon, everyone. We are now in Judges chapter 14. We are now looking into the story of Samson. Now, by way of review, let us just go back up a little bit. And in verse 24 of chapter 13, we read of the birth of Samson, uh, Shimshon, in the Hebrew. And one of the things I wanted to highlight for the purpose of our study today is this word, the Spirit of the Lord. The Spirit of the Lord is Ruach Yehovah. And for our purpose today, I want us to understand that this is the appearance of God upon Samson. This appearance of God is something which is not defined, and we do see that whenever it happens, Samson is displaying a situation where it is supernatural, that it is not humanly possible. And so, this word, the Spirit of the Lord, or the presence of the Lord, is what the Ruach Yehovah describes. Now, I hope that you put this at the back of your mind. Now, the second thing I want to lay out before we get into chapter 14 is this. For 20 years, it is said that Samson is judge of Israel. Now, understand that in this particular instance, which is also the last of the judges in Israel, that Samson did not rule Israel the same way as, say, Deborah ruled Israel. He was depicted in the narrative from chapter 13 onwards as someone in Israel who is operating by himself. And this is a time that this 20 years that Samson was set to judge Israel is during the 40 years that the Philistines ruled over Israel. And so in this time, you can probably see Samson as sort of a messiah, as a lone instigator, to find reasons to go after the Philistines and to demonstrate to the Philistines that he is acting alone and that the repercussion would be on him and him alone and not on the entire nation of Israel. Now, that is the whole concept in the story of Samson. Very different from all the other judges. So, as we proceed into chapter 14, you will slowly understand that Samson is acting on his own, and each action that he took is part of a plan to allow him to act upon the Philistines in a very serious manner to disrupt them and to hurt them in ways which otherwise he couldn't. So let's begin chapter 14. It begins with, and then, sometime after chapter 13, he was born and he grew up, and Samson or Shimshon went down to Timnah. Now we read of Timnah in Genesis 38. 38 in verse 13, we find Judah went up to Timnah, and now Samson went down to Timnah, gives us an impression that it is likely that Timnah is somewhere in between, up and down. So Samson came down and Judah went up. Timnah is somewhere in the land of Ephraim. As he went down to Timnah, and then Samson saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now, this is very important because he is going to look for reasons to fight the Philistines. So he went to the daughters of the Philistines and he saw one lady. And then after he saw her, he went up and then told his father and mother, saying, I have seen a woman in Timnah, the daughters of the Philistines, and now therefore get her or take her for me as a wife. Now understand, in those days, wife means woman, right? So the husband is known as the man and the wife is known as the woman. But what is interesting here is this. There is a Hebrew, Oriental, Eastern practice where the father and mother decides on the marriage. And very strangely, Samson had found a woman, but she is from the Philistines. And being an Israelite, marrying a Philistine would be really a no-no in that culture. God has said that the man should not marry a foreign woman in case a foreign woman leads him to worship other gods. And so it is a precaution. However, Samson has made up his mind that, yes, he wants this woman in Timnah. Now in verse 3, he says, and then his father and mother said to him, is there no woman among the daughters of your brethren, meaning among the Israelites? Remember, Samson and the family is from the tribe of Dan, and right now Dan is mingling around the lands of their brethren. Can't you find somebody among your brethren, an Israelite, or among all my people, that you must go and get a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? And by this, it means that they are not, not Hebrew, right? Of Abraham. And particularly, they are not Israelites. So they're known as uncircumcised. It is not to look down at the Philistines, but the fact that the Philistines do not serve the same God as the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so the parents were very, very concerned. At the end of verse 3, and then Samson said to his father, just take her for me, right? Take her. Ask her hand. Take her for me, for she pleases me well. Now, this one we have to explain a little bit. This word pleases me well literally is she is right. Right? Right in my eyes. Notice the word is not good. The word is right. I would suggest that when the word good in his eyes, it would mean that it would have been functional in Samson's eyes, that it would be the right person to marry. But when it says it is right in my eyes, it seems that there is a plan. She is the right woman in my eyes for his little plan. Now that would be how the text is suggesting. It's not that Samson fell in love or like how Jacob loved Rachel, Rachel. This is very much right in my eyes, being really good for a plan rather than his life. In verse 4, the father and mother did not know that it was of the Lord. Now, this idea is, and I would say that when it was written in, it was given as a commentary that God, well, I won't say it's God in verse 4. This word should be he, as in Samson. That Samson was seeking an opportunity. Now, this word occasion is, I would say, an opportunity. I think that would be a good word to use. An opportunity to move against the Philistines. And this word move against, it is, I guess you can, to demand action. To demand action against the Philistines, he need an excuse. And so he saw this woman in Timnah as, I would say, a pawn in the plan. For at the time, the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Remember, God gave them into the hands of Philistines for 40 years. We're talking about the time then. And so what we are told in the Hebrew is that Samson has a plan, and the woman fits the plan very well. That Samson is looking for an opportunity to fight the Philistines. Verse 5. This word so is, and then he went down to Timnah with his father and mother, and then came to the vineyards of Timnah. Now remember, the vineyard is not for Samson. Samson is a Nazarite. So nothing of grapes is for him to take. Now, according to traditional understanding, when it came to the vineyards of Timnah, they separated ways, where the father and mother went through the vineyards and Samson took another route. As he took that route, he, and then as he took a different route from the parents, he saw, behold, a young lion came roaring against him. Verse 6, and then the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. Remember, this is the wind of God, or the presence of God. And you can't really see what has gotten over Samson, but that he became very strong. And that's what it means by came mightily upon him. And then, well, this is the and then. This one, and then he divided. He divided or split. I think that would be a good word. Split, split the lion apart, as one would have torn apart a young goat. And this is the description of what the wind of God or the ruach of God came upon Samson. It can be seen. And so what is being seen is being described here. Though he had nothing in his hands, so with his bare hands, he tore the lion apart. And he did not tell his father or mother what he had done, which means that for a long time, the father and mother didn't know that Samson had this sudden appearance of supernatural power. And this in itself is still a secret. So the Spirit of the Lord would be the wind of Jehovah, which demonstrates the presence of God because he suddenly had supernatural strength. That's what it means by mightily upon him. In verse 7, and then he continued to go down the hill to Timnah. And then he spoke to the woman at Timnah. And then, you see all this, and then she pleased Samson well. Now, in verse 7, we need to understand that it is important that he went to speak with the woman. And more important, it is something that is, that she is right in his eyes. Again, the word right and not good. Right? She is the right person to get married to for the little plan to hatch. Now, this is a very unusual situation for Samson to go and marry a Philistine woman. And as we have just earlier discussed, it is a plan. And so he confirmed that this plan is good. Verse 8. And then, after some time, he returned to get her. Now, this is important because this is a very, I guess, Hebrew way of doing things. There is an idea of betrothal, right? Betrothal. Betrothal, and then the marriage. But both of this is as good as the relationship sealed. So on the way to get her, he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion that he split into two earlier on. And behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. He took some of it in his hand, went along eating it. When he came to the father and mother, he gave some to them, and they also ate. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion that he had torn in two. Otherwise, there will be just too much to explain. How did he find the lion? That was the same lion on the way there that he tore apart. Now, in verse 10, we continue this up and down scenario. And then his father went down to the woman. You see, here he went down and then he went back. After some time, he returned. So he went down and after that, he went back. And then he went to get the honey. And then he came to his father and mother. And then his father went down And so now he's going down to the woman for the marriage feast. All of this is a narrative to set up that there is a festival, a celebration, and then Samson gave a feast there for young men. It's like that, and this is a Philistine thing, apparently. And then it happened when they saw him that they brought 30 companions to be with him. Now, verse 11 is the beginning of the threat to Samson. 30 companions, that's a lot of people. Verse 12. And then Samson said to them, "Come, let's have a little game." Right? The game is this. I am going to give you a riddle. I guess a riddle would be an enigmatic question. So it is a challenge to them. I will give you a riddle. If you can correctly solve it and explain to me within the 7 days of the feast, so the marriage celebration is 7 days, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. But if you cannot explain to me, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. Now, by way of explaining, this is a lot of garments and linen. A lot, which means that it costs a lot of money. And so in the festivity, then they begin to say, okay. And then they said to him, pose your riddle that we may hear it. And so he said to them, verse 14, out of the eater came something to eat. And out of the strong came something sweet. I guess you can say in another way of writing this, you can say out of from the eater. This is another way of framing it. From the eater came forth food. And from the strong came forth sweetness. This is the riddle. And it seems that for 3 days they could not explain the riddle. But it came to pass on the 7th day, they said to Samson's wife, entice your husband. Now, verse 15 is really a threat. This word entice literally means to deceive your husband, to seduce your husband, and trick him to tell you the answer to the riddle. Or else we will burn you and your father's house with fire. Basically, it is a threat. If you can't get the answer, then you die. Have you invited us in order to take what is ours? Isn't that what you are doing? Now, this verse 15 it's a bit tricky, because the idea here is this word, in order to take what is ours, actually is to dispossess, to dispossess to dispossess us, or to dispossess our wealth. So in order to take what is ours, literally is the word to dispossess. Have you invited us here? Have you called us here to make us lose what belongs to us? Right? That is the question here. Verse 16. And then Samson's wife wept on him. Now, this is quite interesting, the power of a woman's weeping, cry, tears. And in so doing, said, "You only hate me. You do not love me. You have posed a riddle to the sons of my people, but you have not explained it to me." And so this would be the enticement of the woman. We find that in the follow on, Samson told her, "Look, I have not even explained to my father or my mother. Why should I explain it to you?" Now she had wept on him the 7 days while the feast lasted. Interestingly, what happened is this one here, in verse 15, that, on the seventh day, it appears that they actually threatened her, but it would have been that this threat would have started on day one, most likely. That is why she had wept on him the 7 days while the feast lasted, because nobody wanted to lose this little bet. And so it came to pass on the seventh day, and just told us that in the 7 days, they have always asked her to get the answer, but she wasn't able to, right? She wasn't able to. Every day she would do that. And it happened that on the seventh day that he told her why. Now, verse 17 tells us, because she pressed him so much. Now, this word pressed him so much in verse 17 is the idea of oppressing. You can say tormented. And that's what it means by pressed him so much. That she has been persuading, pleading, crying, complaining, and saying all this for 7 days. And right up to the seventh day, Samson gave up and he told her the answer. And then she explained the riddle to the sons of her people. So the men of the city said to him on the seventh day before the sun went down, right before the end of the 7 days. Verse 18 says, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" This is an answer that was a riddle created from the lion that he had torn apart and the honey that he had eaten from the lion. And so there are two answers. What is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than lion? Now, in this case, this one is from the eater came out food. The second one is from the strong came out sweetness. And so the answer really is to deal with the honey and the lion. The strong was the lion, and the sweetness was the honey. And this is a picture of what happened when he tore the lion apart. Now, observe what he said to them. And he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, it is a uh, young female, female cow, I guess. Plow with the cow, with a heifer, a female calf, and this would be the wife. You would not have solved my riddle. So in this case, he actually knew that now that they have solved the riddle, but this is a riddle that they could not have done without. Well, the idea of plowing is to use his female calf to get the answer. Verse 19. He had submitted that, yes, in part, they had given the answer, but they wouldn't have the answer without going through the wife. But then again, that was the young man's approach. So, and then the wind of the Lord, or the presence of God, came upon him mightily. And so every time you see this, it is great strength that God gave him. And then he went down to Ashkelon, and then he killed 30 of their men, which are also Philistines, took their apparel, and then gave the changes of clothing to those who had explained the riddle. Now, what did he not give is the linen. The linen he didn't give. And the commentators really tells us that with this being the case, they did not deserve the full reward and gave them half of it. And so they took their apparel, probably sold them, and bought changes of clothes just to appease them. Now, in verse 19, he said, and then, this word is and then, his anger was aroused. Literally means his nose was hot. And then he went back up to his father's house. This is and then. And this is important because what happened is he left the woman and Samson's wife, and this word is and then. Samson's wife was given to his companion who had been his best man. Now, this is the English translation. Basically, this idea is that he was given to his companion whom he had befriended. I think that would be the way that we understand that he had been close to, right? This would be, but to say is his best man, it is not the right way of putting it. This is a very modern day. There is no best man and bridesmaid in those days. And so this is one of those friends that he had befriended when he went to the place. And so now Samson's wife was given to the friend. I just want to point out to you that there was no divorce. Samson did not divorce the wife. Samson merely went back up to his father's house, but didn't bring the wife along. And in so doing, the wife not having Samson around, then the father of the wife gave her to be the wife of another person. Since there was no divorce and she was then remarried, that amounts to adultery. Now, I will leave this at this point so that we are all aware that that Samson did not divorce the wife from Timnah, and in this event where she had married another man without being formally divorced, then she is still married and then she is with another man, and in Jewish law, that would be considered an adultery. And right now, we are not told what else is happening until we reach chapter 15. But all we know is the wife, who was a Philistine woman, did not go back home with Samson. And this entire episode in chapter 14 was a ruse. It was Samson trying to find out a way of engaging with the Philistines by himself, to find a way to fight them and to hurt them. And this marriage to the Philistine woman is part of that plan. Now, in so doing, we leave Samson today, and we will continue next week to see what else did Samson do, because the plan is progressing. So always remember at the back of your mind that Samson is acting on his own. The Philistines will see Samson acting on his own, so that the Philistines will not go and disturb the rest of Israel. And it is Samson alone who is going after the Philistines. Plot number one, to marry a woman from Timnah. Now, with this, we come to the end of our session today.